You ever land that huge project you've been chasing only to find your bank account emptier than before? In construction, bigger jobs can mean smaller profits. It's like digging a deeper hole just to build a taller building. Today, we're tackling the strange reality that growing your construction business can actually make you less profitable. And it happens everywhere. More revenue coming in, but somehow less money in your pocket at the end of the day. This is the Contractor Success Forum. I'm Wade Crumpet of Carpet Company CPAs, alongside Stephen Brown with McDaniel Whitley Bonding and Insurance. Stephen, what's the most common mistake contractors make when they start trying to expand and land bigger jobs?
Well, it's just the whole perception of profit. They think for sure that this is a unit price type contract. So if I was going to make $20,000 profit on this $100,000 job, on a $1 million job, I'll earn $100,000 guaranteed. And it's the whole perception that if the revenues are higher, then I'm going to make more profit. And the problem with that is you call it a paradox. I think that's a great word. It sounds good. It makes perfect sense. But in reality, there are things that absolutely gut that profit. There's risk. There's how long the job's going to take. There's so many factors involved, and there's overhead that changes because of the needs to do a job that's larger. We're going to dive into that today, right?
Yeah, and a lot of people think they'll make it up on the margin, and sometimes that doesn't translate. We'll get into the overhead part, but the other realization is profit doesn't equal cash flow. And too often we see people, as I was saying, digging a deeper hole. Some of the signs that you try to grow and maybe it's hurting, not helping. If you got all the work you can do right now, but less cash, I've seen many contractors with a full workload, full job calendar. The bank balance is empty while the job calendar is full.
Yeah, we talked about that in the last episode that we did. And it was just regarding cash flow nightmares, looking for a bag to breathe into because you're slammed. Things should be good. Things should be great. Again, more sales solve all your problems. That's the mentality. When it's not the case, something's wrong. And then your plate's full and you got to try to figure out how to turn your ship around. You know how long it takes to change the course of a barge, pushing 5 fully loaded separate barges of just grain alone, just the weight of that, or concrete. It takes a lot of effort. So here you are, you got a full barge and you're going down the river, lickety split, and you got to change course. And there's just a lot that you need to do. Yet again, Wade, there's another analogy for you.
Memphis analogy.
It's
We
Memphis. Okay, there we go. But
don't have those in Atlanta.
yeah, but I guess the point I was trying to make, Wade, is just that sometimes having a full list of jobs in progress, growing your business, adding more work than you can possibly do, I'll just make more margins and we can deal with it. I'm going to be finished with this job in time to get going on this one, to get going on this one. And so you think the timing's right to grow, but then you don't really know behind the scenes what's going to eat into your profit. And I've seen that happen over and over again, Wade.
Yeah. There's several factors for this. And the one thing you've already mentioned, the overhead growing faster than revenue. It's very common to see that. And a lot of times contractors don't understand that you got to have more infrastructure. Maybe you need to hire more people, more trucks. You need to buy more software and get another desk or whatever. Say you got pizza dough or something like that, and you're trying to stretch that working capital as thin as possible, because what's really happening, you go from $500,000 of annual revenue to $1 million. If your revenue doubles, your accounts receivable is doubling. So if you average accounts receivable was, say, $50,000, it's now $100,000 that's sitting out there waiting for 30, 60, 90 days to collect, plus retainage. It's just like a stretched pizza dough is getting thinner and thinner, and pretty soon you got holes in your pizza.
Yeah, then everything's just falling into the bottom of your pizza. You've stretched it too thin.
Yeah.
Maybe we could do an analogy of a pizza on a barge on the Mississippi River. I don't know. But I love that analogy to you spreading your crust too thin.
Yeah. I guess the other thing that happens, like I said, your receivables are going to be growing. So what we often see is we're going to see this additional revenue coming in, or we think we are, We just go ahead and hire up or whatever, but then more bills come in. We got to cover the materials, the subs. And what we often see is your debt starts climbing. So whether your credit cards are building, in spite of these higher sales, the debt keep going up and up. And so that's another one of these signs that you're chasing revenue and not margin. You ever see that?
Absolutely. And like any debt, as you get into it, you just never realize how fast you're getting into it until you're already into it.
Yeah. I guess going back to the math behind all this, you would think that, okay, your overhead is going to shrink as a percentage of your revenue. So, if you've got a $500,000, this is the mentality, and I get it, is you got a $500,000 in annual revenue, you jump to a million, but your overhead was say 100,000. That was 20% overhead. Okay, we grow it to $1 million, that should drop to maybe 10% overhead. That's the thinking. You're going to make more profit. But too often, that percentage of overhead has to grow faster than the top line revenue just to support it. And that's part of the math sabotaging these contractors. I guess another thing, stick with that. Everybody thinks the bigger is better. We always say that, but they tend to give away margin. It's like, okay, well, I'm going to get a bigger job. I'm just going to make it up on the margin. And often that means we bid it lower just so we can get in the door, or we forget the fact that we got even more materials up front. We're going to have more sitting in our receivables. A lot of times these bigger jobs are going to take longer to do. So you got more retainage sitting out there for half a year, sometimes 2 years. This is that strain on working capital we've been talking about.
Yeah. Strain on working capital, a strain on your workforce.
Yeah. But I guess the whole thing is just you need more fuel to run a bigger machine. And that's where people don't realize that bigger doesn't always mean better. So if you're in a growth mode, then you really need to watch some of these things like the overhead and put some kind of parameters around. But if you're going into growth mode and your tank wasn't full to begin with, you're going to stall out on this. Sometimes the bidding practices deteriorate during growth. You start getting too busy, becomes chaos. You're trying to deal with more people and more jobs. And so you end up getting sloppier. Maybe you don't really put as much effort into the bids. Just, hey, just going to just wing it here. Stop tracking actual job costs, and you end up underbidding your future.
You're right. You're more prone to make mistakes as you grow too, because you're venturing into new territory where you make less mistakes on the things that you do over and over again that you can repeat. And so a lot of times you say, this particular project is something that's just something I do all the time that's just a little bit bigger than I'm used to doing. That may be perfect sense. And we're not saying growing your revenues is bad, but growing your revenues and thinking that's going to solve your problems without knowing every detail of how that growth is going to affect your profit is what we're talking about here.
Yeah. I can't tell you how many times we've said on here. I know you've said it. I've said it. I've seen contractors grow themselves right out of business. And it's just like trying to fill a leaky bucket. You keep pouring in more revenue and more revenue when you hadn't fixed these holes. It becomes a cycle. You're too busy, bad pricing, I guess I would say, underbilling your work sometimes, not chasing change orders and those kind of things. These are several of the warning signs that maybe you're growing a little too fast, or you need to really pay attention when you are in growth mode because the cash flow can come out pretty quick.
Okay. We talked about maybe slowing your vessel down so you can stop or turn easier when you're carrying a big load. We talked about spreading your working capital, your cash, thin as if it was a pizza dough that just gets stretched and stretched until it won't even hold the pizza. What other fallacy would you say needs to be observed by our listeners as they're contemplating growth that we see all the time? And I'll just go ahead and start that by saying I see all the time chasing jobs that a contractor really doesn't need to chase. You got to consider the risk involved, and you're chasing a job. It's not something you do all the time, and it's a lot bigger than you've done in the past. You're going to have a hard time getting a bond for that particular project for a reason. There's a reason for that. It may be a new territory. It may be undertaking something new. In an ideal world, the bonding companies want to see you just bite off a job that's no more than twice your biggest job you've completed in the past. That's kind of a rule of thumb there.
Again, we said it before. It's like, are you running short and be able to keep paying your power bill? Credit card balance is increasing. Are you losing people? Are you hiring too fast? Having things like quality issues where you're having to do rework or callbacks, back
Mhm.
charge, those kind of things. Are you stretching your vendors out? Those are all signs that, maybe you are growing a little too fast. And, there are some things we can do about it, but the main thing to be aware of is that there are going to be some changes as you grow.
Okay. What is some of the chaos of growth? What's some of the math behind these situations that you go through as you grow your revenue?
How do you make sure that the math works? I'm a huge proponent of the profit first mentality, especially since my book's coming out in the next few weeks. So how are you going to scale your operating expenses or your overhead? Call it what you will. Contractors never know that number. And when you can dial it in from a cash flow standpoint, that's where you can begin to realize, hey, this is my number. And I've always used 10%, but it's really running 17%. I need to put that into my bid. When you realize this, you start allocating percentages, say, to your overhead. If nothing else, as you grow, you're going to have some kind of artificial guardrail. You start running out of money in your operating account, that bucket starts drying up. That's a little bit of a sign that growth isn't necessarily working for you, or you need to maybe tamp down worrying about going to get that nice new F-250.
Yeah, you're right. It's a bummer to think about, but you can always get that nice new F-250. We're not saying that. We're saying, look at your overhead. As you grow, your overhead changes, whether you want it to or not. With increased sales, your overhead changes. What does that mean? Maybe you can dial it down and streamline it and get it more functional than it's ever been before. And it's not that big of an impact, but it's something that can be a huge swing to the profit margins you actually think you're going to make. Yeah.
I guess I would also say too, if your plan is to grow, you got to realize that you're going to need more working capital. So
Mhm.
maybe you need to build your cash before you start building the business even higher.
This particular job I'm looking at, everything's fine. Don't worry. It's going to cash flow like a champ. We get paid on the 20th of every month. We're going to get paid like clockwork. Don't worry about that. I hear that sort of thing all the time. And I can just tell you again, cash flow and cash doesn't mean anything until you need to buy something. And you got to buy something in order to complete a project. So the flow of that cash, paying your bills, juggling credit, and you still got the owner that is expecting you to finance everything. How
Yeah.
frustrating is that? So you got that going on. And then you mentioned earlier just bidding practices that could fall apart as you get busier. You have your set rules and procedures for bidding projects, and all of a sudden you get busy, or you decide because you want that higher valued project that you're going to disregard some of the things that have always been an important part of your business strategy to go after that. I've seen that happen a lot, Wade.
Yeah. And if you know you're going into growth mode, you need to start putting money aside. Maybe you should build some cash before you build your business. Just going back to the profit first mentality, you start putting profit aside. The idea is maybe we don't take it all at the end of the quarter. We put half of it back to fund some kind of growth reserve, or just actually start putting away a vault account or something like that. Realize the fact that you're going to need more working capital,
Mm-hmm.
and don't just go ahead and buy that new truck or move to a bigger office anticipating growth. You got to really only scale when your systems can handle it.
It's easy to let the tail start wagging the dog, isn't it?
It is. And if you start putting on all these fires, you're not really ready to throw gasoline on your business. Don't chase revenue thinking that, hey, I can just cut my margin. Maybe you need to set some profit benchmarks before you bid. You need to know what that target market is, and don't assume that it's going to show up at the end of the project, because it usually doesn't.
Sure. And Wade, you're exactly right in that. And I've also seen contractors say, I got to get into a different revenue scale in order to get away from my competitors that are just bidding things too low. There may be some wisdom to that. But then again, there's no wisdom in it if you're not bidding it properly. and you're not addressing it prudently, is it a big deal to discuss what you want to do with your financial board of directors, your attorney, your banker, your bonding agent, your insurance agent, and your CPA? These are all people on your board of directors that are going to look at things from a different angle and give you advice on that.
I guess the other thing I would add on to that is say no to bad growth. If it's not profitable, it's not worth doing just to feel like you're doing more. And we understand sometimes people get in those in situations. It's going to happen. But the fact is, you got to be aware of what you're doing because it becomes a spiral. And really, should you actually be cutting your staff back when you run into a situation like that? Nobody wants to do that. But what can we practically do to basically plan for profitable growth? I got a few thoughts. You want to throw anything out?
No, go ahead, Wade.
Really understanding your overhead allocation as you grow and tracking it and watching it, making sure it's not growing out of your. Do you need to adjust your pricing, your bids on to reflect the true costs or prices increasing or whatever? Do you need to build your systems like that pizza dough? Maybe it's designed to support so much of revenue, but do you need to really build the system to scale it effectively? Or is it like you kept it all in your head, but now you hired a project manager and they do it their own way, and then you got a new bookkeeper that does it their way? Do the systems need to follow all that? Again, the idea is let's measure our profit, not just revenue, that revenue top line. You also got to think about the role of your debt. Your debt is probably going to be growing as you scale up, and you probably sometimes have to rely on some of that. But you got to realize that, hey, okay, I'm scaling up, and maybe just big wave of cash, your retainage comes in all of a sudden. Can you really afford to go buy that new excavator or whatever you're trying to get?
Yeah. You might say the bigger jobs will help pay for that excavator. And then I've got an excavator that I own at the end of the project.
Well, the bank owns it, and then you got 7 more years of payments on it.
Yeah, that's right. You just rain in on everybody's parade for buying equipment and tripling their business and doing great things and buying airplanes and things like that. This is all a downer. You can do everything you want to do if you just do it the right way. And you can do it with a whole lot less stress, and you can grow your business, you can grow your revenues, but more importantly, you're growing your profits. So when we're talking about the tail wagging the dog, Wade, the tail should be the profit that is wagging the dog. You talking profit first about taking that profit and sticking it in a separate account, the estimated profit on a job, and just working around it from an expense standpoint. So whatever your sales are, if you're doing that and you're aware of your operating expenses and job expenses, you're gonna be doing better than if you didn't do that. It's like inevitable, isn't it?
Yeah. I guess the main point of today for the contractors out there, maybe you're sitting at a point where, hey, I've actually gotten to this next level and I still don't see it in my pocket. I'm actually working harder, spending more hours, and I don't have any more to show for it. What I hope you take from this is that you may have to change some things the way you're doing it. Maybe put some parameters around, like I'll preach profit first all day long because it really does work. The fact that just you're constraining your cash, so you're naturally going to work very differently when you got one big bank account and you think, hey, big check comes in and you're on top of the world, and then the next Friday you're broke again. The world's coming to an end. That's my thoughts on it.
As we mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, the whole paradox of growing your sales is it's not necessarily answer all your problems or all your desires. You remember me telling you about the coach I was listening to on the podcast. He was saying you can't tell a 5-star recruit that their problems in life do not revolve around money. They're absolutely positive. No. You're right. If I have enough money, that's going to solve all my problems. If you have enough profit in construction, that's going to solve a lot of your problems. It's going to give you more options, right? It's going to just give you more options. And a lot of things that are tried and true in the surety bonding business way are there for a reason. For example, bonding companies generally don't want you to do a job over twice as big as your biggest project. And if you are going after that, you need to really give that bonding company a sales pitch of exactly how you're going to pull it off. And they're more inclined to let you do that bigger job if you have enough cash, because that's your profit. That's your cash. If it costs you cash to finish the job, they're not going to have a claim. So some of them look at it that way. But then taking on a big job that's something new you're not used to doing, or in a new territory that you're not used to working in that territory, creates risk that you just don't know about. And construction is risk management, right? It's your management of the risk. And we're talking about managing overhead as well. And as you're bidding jobs and you're growing, that overhead changes per job. And that's what a lot of contractors don't seem to get. They just plug in a percent over there and say, this is more than enough to handle what I need. But again, it's your expenses you can tie down, your materials you can tie down, your labor costs you can tie down. Can you tie down whether you're going to keep the labor? No. And can you tie down your overhead? You can do as best as you can, but you need to get it as close as possible.
The point today is as you grow, your foundation is probably going to be shifting a little bit. And just like you wouldn't build the foundation on quicksand for building a building, whatever spot you're in right now, you may be slipping, and just make sure you're on solid footing is all I would say. Let's go ahead and wrap this one up. We appreciate you being here. If you have any thoughts or comments, we'd love to hear them in the show notes below. And if you enjoyed this episode, we appreciate if you like, share, subscribe, do all that stuff. It really helps us out. We do this every single week, and we haven't missed a week in 4+ years now. So we're happy about that. But we appreciate you being here, and we will see you on the next show. Thanks.